have any good accountability techniques? So let's shift gears a little bit. Now we'll talk about execution. So obviously it's phenomenal to have this plan built out of execution, but you've got to, like, you coach all these businesses, you've helped grow businesses, you have your own successful businesses. You've got to have some kind of like hack on getting people to actually go execute this plan. I mean, you are accountability masters. So what tools do you use, like softwares? Do you use trackers? Do you use, what do you use?
We use Asana right now.
Okay.
So project management software. We used to just use Excel back in the day, but what we're ultimately doing, regardless of what tool we're using, is we're taking the item. So let's say getting all the sales reps to write down 3 rapport topics for every quote that they go do. Okay. And I'll be like, okay, well, what's involved in doing that? So 1 is I need to build a form that they can use, that they're all agreeing to use. 2, I need to, run them through the form and make sure they understand how to use it. 3 is I need to have maybe, I already have weekly accountability meetings with my team, but like in that weekly accountability meeting, I would need to write in our agenda bullet point so I don't forget about it, that we review it. And then 4 is, whatever, is basically some sort of like, I need to track the number so I can see the closing ratio going up or down based on the fact that we were working on rapport. So now I've got those things, and I'm like, okay, well, next Tuesday, I'll put in, half-hour spot on my, my admin time to work on building this little template for my guys. And I start to block schedule those items into my calendar. And if I don't do them, I pull them. Like I just pull them out of my Google Calendar and I pull it to the Tuesday after or whatever. And it forces me to make sure that the minutia bits that make that one thing happen actually happen. Now, software you can use, like Asana, is a lot better because it literally alerts you. It says this task is overdue. You can assign it to other people. You can create a whole project plan. But at its barest form, you're basically just breaking down the item down to its components, down to its like task list of ideas, scheduling those into your calendar, and following up to make sure they get done. Accountability around that is I'd say relatively obvious. Like we have weekly team meetings where the progress of this stuff is reported on. So if nobody's telling anybody that they've done anything, that's never going to actually happen. But the fact that I have to go to Igor and say, Igor, here's where I'm at with the commitment of getting, better rapport on our sales team. This is what I did last week. I did not get this piece done. So he's like, okay, we'll reschedule it then. And we like physically talk about each of our action items every week and go through what's been done, what hasn't, and then make sure they get rescheduled for the week after.
What happens when you have, I find like a lot of times, like I could list out like 1,000 things that I could be doing. Like I use a plan. I'm like a pen and paper guy. Like I have my to-dos, my planning, and then I'm also digital. Like I have my ways of doing it. I use Airtable. But what happens when you kind of have these guys that aren't wanting to follow a system? They kind of get nervous checking in, like, or they're lazy. I don't know. Maybe they have ADD. They struggle at updating their tasks. They struggle at updating you and saying, I did all these things. Like, why do you need to micromanage? Why do you need to, pay attention to all these things that I'm doing? And you get like this pushback. As a business owner, I feel like sometimes it's not everybody, but I feel like sometimes there's some pushback. So here, Greg, show this.
Simplest form. This is literally like what I use with my sales team. So we've got every week a review meeting. So they update me on how they're doing, biggest wins, number one thing they need help with, right? Their goals are tracked. So we can see last week's goal versus how they did. They actually track long-term down here. So I can see a 1 is a hit, a 0 is a miss. So I can actually just track long-term how they're doing. And here's the initiative section. It's this simple. It's literally like this week, if it's red, you haven't done it. If it's green, you've done it. And if it's yellow, you're currently working on it. That is it. Write down one sentence, turn it one of 3 colors, and we're going to talk about it.
So do you ever have any kind of pay, bonus, point system, incentive around these type of things? Or do you you ever motivate
sprints? So maybe what you're asking, but on activities like that, I usually don't. Although we could, and we may consider doing it actually, because some of my sales guys missed a couple goals during COVID the previous quarter, and I actually might use some of that missed goal money towards them finishing some of their initiatives. So you certainly could. But as of right now, all that I've done is basically said, look, we need a breakdown of these tasks, and all I want is 1 task a week. Go to your sales job, but I want 1 thing a week that you're committing to. I want it block scheduled in, and we're going to talk about it. And Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what matters is that you have a time to review this stuff. Because if you don't have a set time every week to review with your team one-on-one how they're doing,
No, I get it.
the conversation gets lost in translation, right? So I have a half an hour per sales rep on a Monday where it's just me and them. So we have our big team meeting, we have all that stuff, but I have a half an hour with them, and it's every Monday at the exact same time, every week religiously. And they know the agenda coming in. They know on Friday they need to prepare for that meeting. I on Monday morning review their files and then come in prepared on with what I want to talk about. And we talk about the goal from last week, the goal moving forward next week, their implementation items, the things they're working on, and their agenda to make sure they're block scheduled accordingly. And that's the rhythm we're in every week.
I love that. So I think those four things and just having the one-on-ones, you know, I've consulted now 100 plus something companies, and you ask yourself, how many times are you even meeting with their sales guys as a group, let alone one-on-one? How many times are meeting with their departments as a team, let alone, you know what I mean? And I think most business owners and team leads, they think that, oh man, that's redundant, or, oh, that's a waste of my time. And I'm like, no, you're not practicing the power of leverage. You know what's the waste of your time is when you're spending so much time and energy that it's getting exhausted trying to juggle everything. And your people are wanting to work for you. They're wanting to get their stuff done. They just don't have the guidance. And now you're mismanaging, you're misleveraging yourself. And if you could better do what you just said and implement that process to some extent, you would see a massive uptick in performance, I'm assuming, with all your people.
Yeah, my team will call me on a Tuesday randomly and be like, hey, I was wondering about this. I'm like, great, write it down in your notes. We'll cover it on Monday. Right. And then they gather all the things from the week and we have a Monday meeting about all the relative stuff. You know, hey, you're supposed to hit this year-end goal of booking $1 million this year. Well, every week, hey, you're halfway through the year and you're halfway through your goal. Good, you're on pace to hit. Like every week we're problem solving, and I'm basically coaching them internally and I'm building into them as people. And there's weeks where we're not just talking about numbers and implementation items. We're talking about like, you know, they're crying because they're talking about like hard shit that they're going through. And it helps me as a leader keep up with my team and not let things get too bad, and make sure that, you know, if they're going to go spend 5 days doing something, that time is allocated accordingly. And I spend 1 day a week allocating 5 people's time. So the exponential like side of that is huge versus me spending 5 days a week chasing them, trying to keep everybody aligned.
That's good. That's good.